Some jobs ask for experience. This one asks for obedience. Welcome to Night Creepypasta Rules, where every whisper could be a warning, and every rule is a matter of survival. Tall Night's true tale comes from a lonely train station in El Paso, where the 3 a.m. shift is more than just quiet. It's alive. This is I Work at a Train Station at Night in El Paso. We have 3 strange rules, and if you think you'd follow them, you're not ready. Before we begin, subscribe if you think silence is never just silence, and drop a comment below. Would you ask a stranger what year it is? Because after tonight, you just might have to. Stay until the end. This story has a final stop, and not everyone gets off the train. Midnight at El Paso Union Depot. You'd think a place built for arrivals and departures, for the constant thrum of movement would feel wrong when empty. You'd be right. The silence in the cavernous main hall wasn't peaceful. It was watchful, echoing, amplifying the scuff of my own worn sneakers on the polished tile, the distant hum of the ancient HVAC system, the lonely sigh of the desert wind rattling the tall yet arched windows. Outside, the lights of El Paso and Juarez blinked across the border, a river of light separating 2 worlds. Inside, there was just me, the ghosts of passengers long departed, and the weight of 3 a.m. looming. The pay for the graveyard shift ticket agent was barely enough to cover rent on my dingy apartment, but it beat the crushing weight of student loans and the echoing silence of unemployment after dropping out mid-semester. So here I was, Daniel Reyes, dispenser of late-night tickets to nowhere, keeper of the keys to an echoing tomb disguised as a train station. Mostly, the job was just profound boredom, punctuated by the occasional weary traveler or freight crew passing through. Mostly. Except for the list-old Caleb Hayes, the station's resident phantom of maintenance, had given me my first week. 3 rules, he swore, weren't suggestions, spat out between puffs of a hand-rolled cigarette, his eyes grim. Rules, he said, were the only difference between clocking out and just disappearing down the line. The station itself was magnificent, in a faded, haunted way. Grand Spanish colonial revival architecture, soaring ceilings, intricate tilework, heavy carved wooden benches, worn smooth by a century of waiting. But at night, the grandeur felt hollow, the shadows pooling deep and dark under the high arches, the vast emptiness swallowing sound. The air smelled perpetually of diesel fumes, ingrained dust, faint disinfectant, and sometimes, inexplicably, like old, cheap perfume or stale cigar smoke. When no one else was around, Caleb Hayes materialized from the shadowed end of the concourse, pushing a rattling cleaning cart with the slow, deliberate pace of a man who had walked these floors for more decades than I'd been alive. He was wiry, weathered, his face a roadmap etched by desert sun and something deeper, more weary. His faded gray uniform hung loosely on his frame. He stopped, as I'd seen him do before, by the massive, ornate station clock mounted high on the wall. He didn't just glance at it. He pulled out a small, tarnished silver key, unlocked a tiny panel at its base, fiddled inside for a moment, listened intently with his head cocked, then locked it again with a decisive click, seemingly satisfied, though the clock already showed the correct time. He nodded curtly as he passed my booth. "Quiet night, Reyes." "So far, Caleb," I replied. His rituals, his quiet intensity unnerved me almost as much as the station itself. A few minutes later, Maria Flores, the overnight security guard, made her rounds. Young, maybe late 20s, but with watchful eyes that held no illusions about the job or the location. Her uniform was crisp, her posture alert as she scanned the echoing hall. "Todo tranquilo, Danny?" she asked, pausing by my window. "Yeah, Maria. Dead as usual," I said. She nodded, her gaze sweeping the empty benches, the shadowed corners. "Good. Good. Keep it that way. She lowered her voice slightly. Caleb seemed okay tonight. Saw him messing with that clock again. Same as always. I shrugged. Right, she said, a hint of something unreadable in her tone. Caution? Pity? Just, he gets set in his ways. Watches things. Stick to your post. Report anything really weird. Don't go wandering. She gave a brief nod and continued her patrol, her footsteps echoing smartly before fading into the vastness. Her warning about Caleb felt as much a part of the station's strangeness as the rules themselves. I tried to focus on paperwork, the rhythmic click of my pen the only sound for a long stretch, but the unease was a constant companion here. Lights in the distant, unused platform. 5 corridor would flicker when no trains were due. I'd hear faint footsteps on the mezzanine above, only to find it completely empty when I forced myself to look. And always, the feeling of being watched from the high, shadowed arches overhead. Just before 1 a.m., Caleb reappeared, leaning against the ticket window, the smell of harsh tobacco clinging to him. His usual gruffness was replaced by that same grim seriousness I remembered from my first night. All right, Reyes, reminder. Night's young yet. He ticked the points off on his gnarled fingers, his voice low and urgent. Rule of 1. After midnight, you see a kid. Alone. On the platforms, in the waiting room, doesn't matter. Looks lost. Maybe crying. You ignore him. Completely. Don't talk to him. Don't approach him. Don't call it in unless they're causing a real disturbance. Which they usually don't. They're just there. You leave him be. Understand? I nodded, the memory of his initial warning making my skin crawl. Rule 2. Vending machine down by the west entrance, he continued, jerking a thumb towards the dimly lit area. The old one rattles like hell. Sometimes it gives out more than just soda. Might drop an old train ticket. Brittle thing may be dated decades ago. If it does, you leave it. Don't touch it. Don't pick it up. Don't even look at it too close. Just walk away. Rule 3. He leaned closer, his eyes boring into mine. Someone comes up to you. Might look like station staff. Might look like anyone. But they say something specific. Relax, kid. Or go home, or something like. It's not your shift tonight. If you hear those words, or anything damn close, you don't argue. You don't panic. You look him straight in the eye, and you ask him one question. Nice and calm. What year is it? Got it. Ask the year. He straightened up, the intensity fading slightly. Just follow the rules, kid. Keeps the echoes quiet. Mostly. He gave another curt nod and shuffled off towards the maintenance tunnels, leaving me alone again in the echoing silence. Echoes. Was that what they were? I shook my head, trying to dismiss it. Just an old man. An old station, late night jitters. I glanced up at the main departure board hanging high above the concourse, its digital display showing the next Amtrak departure, hours away. As I watched, the bright pixelated letters flickered violently for a split second. Oh, the Amtrak info vanished, replaced by crisp, antique-looking white text. Golden State Limited, Chicago. Platform 2, on time. Octi 17, 1948. My heart stopped. I blinked, staring, certain I was hallucinating from exhaustion. Then, just as quickly, the board flickered again, snapping back to the current Amtrak schedule. Nothing. Had I imagined it? Or was 1948 just another echo, waiting for its train on the midnight dispatch? The silence of the station suddenly felt infinitely deeper, colder. The first week bled into the second, a blur of echoing silence, stale coffee, and the low, mournful cry of distant freight trains passing through the desert night. I learned the station's nocturnal rhythms, the precise time the last Amtrak pulled out, leaving the platforms utterly deserted, The way the old building groaned and settled in the cooling air. The specific pattern of Maria Flores' security patrols. The almost ritualistic way Caleb Hayes would appear from the maintenance tunnels, check certain clocks or specific floor tiles, then vanish again into the shadows. And I learned to live with the low-level hum of anxiety generated by his 3 rules, constantly replaying them in my head. The first test came on a Tuesday night, or maybe Wednesday morning. The hours blurred together here. The 1:17 a.m. train to Dallas had departed, its receding rumble fading into the vast quiet. I was doing a quick walkthrough of the platforms, the air still carrying the faint metallic scent of diesel and hot brakes. Platform 3 was deserted, bathed in the weak yellow glow of the overhead safety lights, stretching long and empty towards the darkness at the far end. Except it wasn't entirely empty. Standing utterly still near the very end of the platform, partially obscured by a support pillar, was the figure of a small child. They wore simple, slightly old-fashioned looking clothes, overalls perhaps, and seemed to be staring out towards the dark, empty tracks. My heart gave a jolt. A lost kid? At this hour? Every instinct screamed at me to approach, to call out, ask if they were okay, find their parents. But Rule 1 slammed down like a crossing gate. See a lone child after midnight. Don't speak to them. Caleb's grim face, his urgent warning, echoed in my mind. Leave 'em be. Draws attention you don't want. I forced myself to stop, to turn around, my footsteps unnaturally loud on the concrete, as I walked briskly back towards the brightly lit main concourse, fighting the urge to look back. The feeling of wrongness, of abandoning a potentially lost child, warred with the cold primal fear Caleb's rules had instilled. Back inside the relative safety of the main hall, I risked a glance back through the large glass doors towards Platform 3. It was empty, completely empty. No sign anyone had ever been there. Just the shadows, the yellow lights, and the lonely stretch of track disappearing into the desert night. Had I imagined it? A trick of the light? Or was that one of the echoes Caleb mentioned? Later, when Maria made her rounds, I reported it carefully over the internal radio, keeping my voice steady. Dispatch Reyes. Thought I saw maybe an unattended child on Platform 3 about 10 minutes ago. Did a sweep. Platform is clear now. Just logging it. Her voice crackled back, professional but with an edge of something else. Platform 3. After midnight? Negative. Reyes. Cameras show platforms clear for the last hour. Probably just shadows playing tricks down that end. Or a stray coyote pup wandering in. Good call not to approach anything unusual out there alone, though. Shadows. Right. But the image felt too solid, too present. When Caleb shuffled through later, emptying trash bins, I tried a different tack. Hey Caleb, ever have problems with kids getting separated from parents on the late trains? Must be easy to lose track in a place this big. He stopped abruptly, dropping a bin lid with a clang that echoed through the hall. He turned, his face pale under the fluorescent lights, eyes narrowed. Kids? Lost? He rasped, his voice tight. No, not lost, just echoes, kid. Things left behind. Sounds left behind. You see something? Thought I saw a kid on Platform 3 earlier, I admitted hesitantly. Caleb's reaction was immediate, almost violent. Platform 3? After midnight? He gripped his broom handle tightly. Listen to me, Reyes. You leave it alone. Don't look too close. Don't talk to them. Don't even think about them too hard. They're just static on the line. You mess with static, you get noise you don't want. Understand? Stick to the damn ticket counter. He turned abruptly and shuffled away, muttering under his breath about echoes and stirring things up. His fear was more convincing than any denial. Later that night, tidying the lost and found shelf behind the counter. Mostly just old phone chargers and forgotten paperbacks. My fingers brushed against something small and wooden. It was a little toy train, carved from dark wood, clearly handmade, its wheels worn smooth. It looked decades old. I was certain it hadn't been there when I started my shift. I stared at it for a long moment. The wood cooled against my fingertips, then carefully placed it back exactly where I found it, trying to ignore the sudden icy dread coiling in my stomach. The following nights were tense. Every shadow seemed to hold a small figure. Every distant sound could be a child's cry. I did my rounds quickly, sticking to well-lit areas, avoiding Platform 3 entirely after midnight. The feeling of being watched was constant. A prickle on the back of my neck, once or twice. I thought I heard faint, discordant whistling drifting through the empty concourse. That recurring whistler echo Caleb had vaguely mentioned. But the sound always faded before I could pinpoint its source. The station's inherent creepiness was amplified by my knowledge of the rules, turning mundane occurrences into potential threats. One particularly slow night, craving caffeine and sugar, I made my way to the ancient, rattling vending machine tucked away in the deserted West Wing waiting area. The machine was a relic, chrome-pitted, selection faded, humming loudly in the silence. I fed it some crumpled dollar bills, pressed the button for a soda. The machine groaned, shuddered violently, then dispensed my can with a loud clatter. But something else fell into the delivery tray with it. Not a coin, but a small rectangular piece of stiff cardstock. Curious, I picked up my soda and peered closer. It was an old-fashioned train ticket, the paper yellowed and brittle with age. Heavy, ornate font declared it property of the Southern Pacific Line. The destination was smudged, unreadable, perhaps water-damaged long ago. But the date, stamped clearly in faded purple ink, was chillingly legible. Oct 17, 1948. Rule 2. If the vending machine gives out an expired ticket, don't take it. My fingers hovered over the ticket. It felt strangely compelling. A tangible piece of the past right here. Where did it lead in 1948? Who was meant to take that journey? What story did it hold? The urge to pick it up, to slip it into my pocket, was surprisingly strong. But Caleb's grim warning echoed louder. Don't touch it. I snatched my soda can and backed away quickly, leaving the impossible ticket lying forlornly in the metal tray, the vending machine humming innocently behind me, though now its hum seemed to hold a low, expectant thrum. I mentioned it to Maria when she passed through later. That old vending machine by the west entrance just gave me a train ticket from 1948 along with my soda. She sighed, shaking her head, but didn't seem overly surprised. That old junker, always acting up. Last week, it spat out only dimes. Caleb's forever tinkering with its insides. Says he's recalibrating the temporal sequencer or some damn fool thing like that. She rolled her eyes. Probably just crossed some wires messing around. Ignore anything weird it spits out, Danny. Seriously. She logged the malfunction on her report, adding a note about Caleb's maintenance. Later, making another round, I saw Caleb near that same vending machine. He wasn't using tools. He had the front panel open slightly, and I saw him carefully place something small and metallic, maybe one of those old silver dollars, into the coin return slot from the inside. He was humming softly to himself, a tune I didn't recognize. He closed the panel quickly when he saw me approaching, giving me a guarded look. Just checking the condenser, he mumbled, shuffling away. He wasn't fixing it. He was interacting with it, purposefully. As I walked back towards the main hall, the air suddenly grew thick with a heavy sulfurous smell of coal smoke, pungent and overwhelming for a few seconds, then vanished completely. And glancing up at the big station clock. Caleb's clock. I could have sworn the second hand stuttered, jumped backwards 5 full seconds, then resumed its steady sweep, as if nothing had happened. The station wasn't just haunted by echoes. Something or someone was actively stirring the timeline. The feeling of temporal instability grew stronger over the following nights. I started hearing things more clearly. Not just whispers, but distinct snippets of conversation drifting from empty waiting rooms, speaking of train schedules from the 50s, or arguments in rapid-fire Spanish that sounded like they belonged in a different century altogether. I saw shadows that moved with purpose, figures in wide-brimmed hats or long skirts vanishing around corners just as I turned. The station felt less empty, more crowded with unseen, displaced presences. My sleep schedule was wrecked. Caffeine intake maxed out. Paranoia became my default setting. It happened on a Thursday. The 3:30 a.m. arrival from Houston was delayed, leaving the station particularly dead. I was leaning against the ticket counter, fighting to keep my eyes open, when footsteps approached steadily across the echoing tile floor. I looked up, expecting Maria on her rounds. Instead, it was a man in a slightly worn but clean station porter uniform, the kind they hadn't used in maybe 20 years. He looked vaguely familiar. Maybe George, one of the older guys who worked the baggage claim during the day shift? But something was off. His eyes seemed too bright, almost feverish, and his smile was wide, fixed, unnatural. He stopped at the counter, leaning in conspiratorially. "Rough night, huh?" he said, his voice sounding distant, slightly tinny. "Slow one. Guess I'm a bit early for my shift. Might as well take over now. Let you get some rest." He winked, a horribly artificial gesture. "It's not your shift tonight." The words hit me like a physical blow. Rule 3. My heart leaped into my throat. This wasn't George. This was something else. Something wearing George's face. I gripped the edge of the counter, forcing myself to meet that fixed, unnatural smile. My voice came out as a croak. My mistake. Must have lost track of time working nights. I took a shaky breath. "What year is it?" The effect was instantaneous and horrifying. The figure's smile froze, then cracked like plaster. Confusion washed over its features, replaced by raw, primal terror. The eyes widened, pupils dilating into black pits. The phone began to flicker violently, like a bad television signal. Edges blurring, features elongating, stretching into something impossibly tall and thin. For a horrifying instant, a silent scream seemed to emanate from it, a pressure building inside my head, making my teeth ache. Then, with a final violent flicker, it dissolved into nothingness, leaving behind only the faint smell of ozone and the heavy silence of the station. I was shaking uncontrollably, leaning heavily on the counter for support. I grabbed my radio, my voice trembling. "Maria? Flores, come in." Her voice crackled back almost instantly. "Reyes? What's wrong?" "Rule 3. I choked out. "Just invoked Rule 3. Looked like George from baggage claim said it wasn't my shift." There was a pause, then Maria's voice grim, serious. "George retired 5 years ago, Danny. Died from a heart attack 2 years back." Another pause. "You asked the year?" Yeah, I did." "Good," she said, the single word carrying immense weight. "Stay put. I'm on my way." Her quick arrival, the grim understanding in her eyes as I stammered out the description, offered cold comfort but undeniable validation. The rules were real. The threats were real. The threats were real. Latter, driven by a need to confront the only person who might have actual answers, I found Caleb Hayes in a dimly lit maintenance tunnel, ostensibly checking junction boxes. I told him about George, about asking the year, about the figure dissolving. Caleb reacted with sudden, defensive anger, throwing a wrench down with a clang. "Imagination," he spat, refusing to look at me. "Lack of sleep. This damn station plays tricks on you when you're tired, makes you see things. I told you, Stick to the damn rules I gave you and stop chasing shadows. You keep poking around, asking questions, you're gonna stir up trouble you can't handle." He turned his back, pointedly resuming his work on the junction box, shutting down the conversation completely. His denial was too vehement, too angry. He wasn't just dismissive, he was actively trying to stop me from understanding. Back in the relative safety of the ticket booth, feeling more isolated than ever, my hand brushed against something hard in the back of a rarely used drawer as I searched for spare ticket rolls. I pulled it out. An old, tarnished brass railroad pocket watch. Heavy, ornate. I popped the cover. The hands were stopped. Not at midnight, not at 3. They pointed precisely to 4:17. I didn't know why, but the stopwatch felt like another piece of the puzzle. Another echo from a time that refused to stay dead. And I had a growing, sickening feeling that Caleb Hayes knew exactly what time it was referencing. Caleb Hayes was lying. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, cold and sharp amidst the echoing silence of the station. His angry denials, his overly vehement dismissals of the station's escalating weirdness, his insistence I stick to the rules and stop chasing shadows. It wasn't just the caution of an old man weary of superstition. It was active misdirection. He knew more. He was involved. Fueled by a mixture of fear and frustrated anger, I started watching him, really watching him, during the dead hours of my shift. His maintenance routines took on a sinister new light. They weren't random. He always lingered near specific, seemingly innocuous spots. The rattling vending machine in the West Wing. The far-shadowed end of Platform 3 where I'd seen the child echo. The grand, ornate station clock he meticulously adjusted despite it, keeping perfect time. He carried a different tool bag on these late-night rounds. Smaller, heavier, clinking softly with contents that didn't sound like wrenches and screwdrivers. One particularly quiet night, convinced Caleb was up to something near Platform 3 again. I slipped away from the ticket counter, using the deep shadows cast by the massive support pillars for cover. I saw him disappear into a narrow, disused maintenance tunnel, tucked away behind a stack of forgotten luggage carts. A tunnel clearly marked. No entry. Danger. My heart pounded. This was it. Waiting until I heard his shuffling footsteps fade deeper into the tunnel, I pulled out my phone's flashlight and cautiously followed. The air inside was thick with the smell of damp concrete, rust and stale oil. It was colder here. The silence absolute except for the drip of unseen water. Tucked away behind a pile of discarded metal shelving and loose bricks, I found his cache. A battered metal lockbox forced open easily. Inside weren't maintenance tools. It held several notebooks filled with Caleb's tight, cramped handwriting, yellowed newspaper clippings detailing disappearances or unexplained deaths connected to the station going back decades, hand-drawn diagrams overlaying station blueprints with complex symbols and what looked like astrological charts. And nestled amongst the papers were strange components, old vacuum tubes, coils of copper wire, crudely soldered circuit boards attached to batteries, makeshift devices. The notebooks told a story far darker than malfunctioning equipment or lingering echoes. They spoke of Caleb's younger brother, Thomas, vanishing without a trace from Platform 3 one night in the late 1940s. Caleb, just a teenager then himself, had apparently been there, witnessed something. He blamed himself. The notebooks chronicled decades of consuming grief, morphing into obsessive research, into local folklore, temporal mechanics, fringe science, anything that offered a sliver of explanation or hope. He hadn't just become aware of the station's thin spots. He had actively sought them out, mapping them. He referred to the force behind the phenomena not as ghosts, but as it, or the taker, or, chillingly, the collector of lost things. His maintenance wasn't maintenance at all. It was experimentation. He was using his crude devices, powered by tapping into the station's old electrical grid, trying to measure, amplify, even trigger the anomalies, particularly around the time and place his brother vanished. He was trying to force open a door, to bargain with the collector, to somehow get Thomas back. The pocket watch I'd found, Thomas's watch, stopped at 4:17 a.m., the moment Caleb believed his brother was taken. One entry, dated just yesterday, detailed his plan for tonight. A specific planetary alignment, combined with tapping into a major power conduit near Platform 3, would create the strongest resonance yet. His best chance, he wrote, to make contact. I had to stop him. This wasn't just grief anymore. It was dangerous, reckless obsession that could tear the fragile fabric of this place apart. I raced back out of the tunnel, heart hammering, just as the lights overhead flickered violently. I found him at the deserted far end of Platform 3, exactly where the notebook indicated, kneeling beside a large, open junction box near the tracks, wire snaked out, connected to one of his humming, faintly glowing contraptions. The air around him felt unnaturally cold, vibrating slightly. "Caleb, stop!" I yelled, running down the platform towards him. "I know what you're doing. I found the notebooks. Thomas, you can't bring him back like this. You'll get us all killed." He scrambled to his feet, spinning around, his face illuminated by the eerie glow of his device. It wasn't the face of a weary old man anymore. It was the face of a zealot, eyes wide with a terrifying mixture of panic, fury, and insane hope. "You meddling fool," he snarled, shielding the device with his body. "You stay away. You don't understand. It took him. The collector. It keeps them. The lost ones, the echoes. But tonight, the resonance is perfect. I can make contact. I can offer it something. Maybe it'll trade." "Trade what, Caleb?" I yelled, skidding to a halt a few feet away. "There's nothing to trade. There's always something," he screamed back, his voice cracking. "Those rules I gave you, just worthless scraps to keep nosy idiots like you away from the real work, away from the thin spots. Tonight it will listen. Tonight, Thomas comes home." As he frantically twisted a dial on his humming device, the air pressure dropped dramatically. The lights along the platform flickered and died, plunging us into near darkness, lit only by the device's sickly green glow and the distant city lights. A low multi-toned humming rose, seemingly from the tracks themselves, from the very air around us, growing steadily louder, resonating deep in my chest. The shadows beneath the platform canopy writhed, deepened, coalescing into a swirling vortex of utter blackness, far darker than the surrounding night. And within that swirling void, faint, translucent shapes began to flicker into existence. The pale face of the lone child I'd seen, its eyes wide with eternal fear. The fixed, artificial smile of the man who looked like George. Dozens of other, indistinct figures in clothes from countless different eras. Their faces masks of sorrow, confusion, or terror. The collector wasn't one thing. It was a maelstrom of captured moments, of souls snagged on the hooks of time and tragedy, all swirling within its cold, consuming vortex. The air filled with a cacophony of overlapping whispers, fragments of goodbyes never said, anxious questions in Spanish and English, train whistles from phantom engines, and weaving through it all, the faint mocking tune of the whistler. "It's here!" Caleb cried, tears streaming down his face, a grotesque mix of terror and ecstatic hope. "It heard." He turned towards the swirling vortex, arms outstretched. "Take me! Take me if you want! Just give him back! Give me back my brother!" The vortex surged, darkness reaching for him like greedy tendrils. Tickets, dozens, hundreds of brittle, expired train tickets from every era, fluttered down from the swirling void like dead leaves. Child echoes flickered like faulty projections at its edges. Then Caleb spun, his eyes locking onto me with wild desperation. "Or take him," he shrieked, pointing a trembling finger my way. "He is new, unclaimed, A fresh echo. Take him instead. Take him instead! The swirling mass of shadows and flickering souls. The predatory core of the collector hesitated for a fraction of a second, then surged towards me. The whispers intensified into a deafening roar of countless lost voices, tendrils of absolute cold, filled with faint, struggling shapes, reached out, promising oblivion, promising collection. I was trapped between Caleb's insane, grief-stricken bargaining and the full, terrifying manifestation of the entity that haunted the crossroads of time at Union Depot. The swirling vortex of shadows and spectral figures recoiled violently as my shouted question, "What year is it?" echoed across the deserted platform. It wasn't a command it recognized, not part of the grief or fear it fed upon. It was a paradox, a temporal anchor thrown into its chaotic storm. The collected echoes within flickered violently, their forms distorting, as if struggling against the intrusion of linear time. The deafening whispers faltered. The oppressive psychic weight lessened fractionally, the forward surge halting. In that momentary disruption, harsh beams from heavy-duty flashlights cut through the unnatural darkness from the concourse entrance. "DPD, drop it, Caleb. Step away from the edge." Maria Flores's voice amplified electronically, sharp with authority. She wasn't alone. 2 uniformed El Paso police officers flanked her, weapons held at low ready, their presence a sudden, jarring intrusion of mundane procedure into the supernatural chaos. The combination, my reality-checking question, the sudden bright lights, the assertion of official authority, seemed to overload the manifestation. The swirling vortex shuddered, pulsed weakly, then rapidly pulled back, dissolving into the deepest shadows beneath the platform canopy, like smoke dispersing in a strong wind. The whispers faded, the spectral figures vanished. Left behind was only a profound, bone-deep cold that felt colder than any desert night, the faint smell of ozone, and the low, erratic hum of Caleb's sputtering device. Caleb Hayes himself collapsed onto the grimy concrete, the device clattering from his nerveless fingers. He wasn't physically harmed, but his eyes were vacant, staring blankly towards the shadows where the collector had retreated, whispering his brother's name. Thomas. Almost. He seemed utterly broken, the decades of obsessive hope shattering. In the face of that terrifying reality, Maria moved in quickly, efficiently cuffing Caleb. For his own safety, she muttered, more to herself than to me, as she recited his rites in a low monotone. Her professional mask was firmly back in place, but I saw the slight tremor in her hands as she holstered her own weapon, the deep unease in her eyes as she surveyed the platform. She signaled the other officers to secure the area, their bewildered faces stark in the flashlight beams. Later, while waiting for paramedics to assess Caleb, who remained largely unresponsive, lost in his own fractured timeline, and for detectives to arrive, Maria found me leaning heavily against a cold support pillar, trying to stop shaking. "You okay, Reyes?" she asked, her voice quiet now. "Define okay," I managed, my voice hoarse. She offered a grim smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Asking the year. Damn, never seen that work on, well, on something that big before. Usually just disperses the smaller echoes." She sighed, looking down the dark platform. "My abuelo, my grandfather, he worked this station 50 years. Lost his younger sister right here. Platform 3. Back in the 30s. Said she just walked towards a sad little girl waving from the tracks and vanished. He always warned us about the Collector of Sorrows. Called this station a Lugger Delgado, a thin place. Said it draws things in, things that get lost between the moments, things that feed on grief." She looked towards the unresponsive Caleb with pity. "He wasn't the first to lose someone here, Danny, and he wasn't the first to get obsessed trying to bargain with the silence. It never ends well." Her words confirmed it. The rules weren't arbitrary. They were hard-learned survival tactics against a specific predatory entity drawn to this nexus of travel and tragedy. Caleb hadn't just been eccentric. He'd been actively, dangerously engaging with it, fueled by a grief I could barely comprehend. As the paramedics wheeled Caleb away on a gurney, still murmuring his brother's name, I felt a cold dread settle over me. I had survived the direct confrontation, but the collector knew me now. It had focused on me. I retrieved Caleb's notebook from where it had fallen near his device. The last entry was frantic, almost illegible, referencing Thomas's pocket watch, the one I still had, tucked away. The watch holds his last second here. Caleb had scrawled, "Maybe it can follow the time? Maybe it trade? Watch for the boy?" Had Caleb intended to offer the watch, or me, as bait? Maria watched me pocket the notebook. "Detectives will want a statement," she said quietly. "Keep the weird stuff minimal, plausible. Caleb's breakdown, faulty equipment he built. They won't understand the rest. No one does, unless they work the midnight dispatch long enough." She paused. "You gonna stay?" The question hung in the cold air. Stay here, knowing what lurked just beyond the flickering lights, knowing the collector now knew my name. Or run. I looked down the long, empty platform, the silence seeming to press in again. I gave my statement, focused on Caleb's erratic behavior, his strange devices, the localized power surges, the resulting disorientation, and hallucinations under duress. I mentioned his obsession with his brother's disappearance decades ago, plausible deniability. The detectives seemed to buy it, or were willing to, classifying it as a mental health crisis exacerbated by trespassing and tampering with station equipment. Caleb was transferred to a long-term psychiatric facility. I quit the next morning, handed him my badge, my keys, my ill-fitting uniform. I didn't say goodbye to Maria. We just shared a brief nod, a silent acknowledgement of the shared secret, the shared survival. I walked out of Union Depot into the bright El Paso morning sun, feeling like a deep-sea diver surfacing too quickly, the mundane world seeming too loud, too bright, unreal. Before leaving town, I drove out to a deserted stretch of highway and threw Thomas Hayes' tarnished pocket watch as far as I could into the creosote-dotted desert. Let the past stay buried. Months later, a new city, hundreds of miles away. Gray skies, persistent rain, the antithesis of the dry desert heat. I found a quiet job, data entry in a windowless office. Tried to build a wall of routine around the memories, around the lingering chill that sometimes surfaced for no reason. I avoided train stations, bus depots, anywhere with that specific transient energy, that feeling of people lost between destinations. I thought I was okay, managing. Then the subtle shifts began, finding myself inexplicably drawn to missing persons posters, taped to lampposts, feeling a pang of illogical empathy for the faded faces staring out, a discomfort in large crowds. Not claustrophobia, but an unnerving awareness of the individual threads of loneliness and quiet desperation humming beneath the noise, and the figures at the edge of my vision. A child darting down an alleyway who vanishes when I look directly. An old man in outdated clothes, glimpsed in a shop window reflection. The faint strain of whistling just on the edge of hearing, late at night, echoes, or was my mind simply replaying the trauma? I clung to the latter explanation, until today, waiting for a bus on a busy downtown street corner, the city a swirl of gray drizzle and hurried commuters, normalcy. Then, the sudden, localized chill. Not just the damp air, but that specific bone-deep cold I remembered from Platform 3, raising goose flesh on my arms. And with it, faint but unmistakable, the smell of ozone and something else, something like dust and unshed tears. My head snapped up, scanning the crowd frantically. Across the street, amidst the anonymous rush of bodies and umbrellas, I saw her, just for a second, standing perfectly still on the wet pavement. A small girl, maybe 5 or 6, pale face turned towards me, wearing simple, slightly old-fashioned clothes damp with rain. Her eyes were wide, dark, empty. The child from platform 3. The child from platform 3. A bus pulled up, momentarily blocking my view. When it pulled away, she was gone. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, the city's noise fading to a dull roar in my ears, the unnatural chill lingering around me like a shroud. I had left El Paso. I had left the station. But the collector remembers. Its vast, sorrowful collection wasn't bound by geography, and it knew my name. It saw me. The rules didn't apply out here, but the awareness, the chilling connection forged in that terrified night remained. I was marked, attuned to loss, forever catching glimpses of the collected ghosts in the periphery of the living world. The final departure had never really happened. You can quit the job, you can leave the city, but you can't unlearn the rules. He saw the echoes, he followed the guidelines, he survived, but the collector doesn't clock out. And it remembers faces. If this story chilled you, tell us in the comments, what rule would you break? Or better yet, which one would break you? Subscribe to Night Creepypasta Rules for more stories where reality is thin, and rules are the only thing between you and the echo that wants to wear your skin. Next time you're in a quiet station and someone tells you, it's not your shift tonight, don't panic. Just ask, what year is it? This isn't a warning, it's an arrival.